Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. And the subjects that we have for today, it's my pleasure also to teach this. It's difficult to express exactly the feeling or the idea, but I live on these subjects, even though the book itself that you're reading, which is a great book. I mean, I understand who the author is, etc. I did not read the book itself, the whole book. I just read a few parts of it, but it's based on the main teachings that Chabad Hasidism has. So it's not new information for me. I mean, it's always something you can find something newer and something deeper. That's true, but it's not new ideas. And the other part of the text is based on the Rambam. So I'll explain. Let's go step by step. Let's do this, if it's okay with you, let's do this in two parts, so to speak. Part number one, I'm going to briefly explain what the texts are, what they talk about. And afterwards, I'm open to questions, to ideas, whatever you want to share. I'm here to answer, to at least try to answer the possible questions. So let's go. First of all, the text that Angelique sent me, again, is based on two different texts. It's two different parts of the Torah that the author put together, which is okay, that's fine, it's not a problem. I'm just saying it's two different texts from two different authors in two different places in the world, in two different ages, and completely different parts of the world, so to speak. First part is called Sha'ar HaYichud VaEmunah. Sha'ar HaYichud VaEmunah in Hebrew means like the gates of the unity of God and the faith in God. That's the first part. And it's not like the author did not copy exactly the text. He took from here, from there, and he made his own text, which is also okay. I'm not criticizing anything. I'm just saying what the structure of the ideas are. And I would like to explain just a little bit what the text is aimed to. Like, why did the Alter Rebbe wrote this text? First of all, the Alter Rebbe wrote many things. The most two important things that Rebbe actually founded the Hasidic Chabad movement. He wrote two main things within all kinds of other texts. The first one is called the Shulchan Aruch, like the Jewish code of law, and like a new version in his age already. The Shulchan Aruch was already old, so he wrote a new version. Most of it actually got burned. We don't have it, but whatever. That's a different story for a different class. And also he wrote a book called Tanya. Why is it called Tanya? Because the first word of the book is Tanya, which actually represents a teaching. It doesn't matter right now, all the details. I'll keep it as briefly as possible to be able to explain as simple as possible. There's always room for deeper learning. Now, this text, Tanya, actually has 5 parts. Without talking about all the details of all the parts, the Alter Rebbe originally thought to open his book with what today we have as the second part. For us, it's the second part, but he thought this should be the first part. Then, I don't know why, he changed his mind and he put a different part as the first part, and he left what we have today as the second part as the second part. But how do we know that he actually thought to put it as the first part? Because he includes ideas in this second part that he says, I'm going to explain them later. And actually, he explains them before. So we know that there's something over there going on. Yeah, Tanya, the book Tanya, exactly. So this second part has an introduction. And the introduction, actually, many people don't read it and don't learn it, but the introduction is what the name actually means in an introduction, and why and what you're going to read throughout the rest of the text. What does the introduction talk about? One main important point. All of us, we're human beings. The Alter Rebbe doesn't say it this way. This is my humble interpretation. We're all human beings, and we have ups and downs, like everybody else. And it's actually a verse, Sheva ipol tzadik v'kam. 7 times, like a righteous person is going to fall and is going to rise up again. It's going to like lift up again. So in matters of faith, in matters of religion or whatever word you want to use, in our relationship with God, of course, we have falls, ups and downs, ups and downs. One day you feel like, yes, God is the creator of everything. And one day you feel like, I don't know. Is it really like that? I have my doubts, which is okay. Everybody goes through these 2 stages and they interchange throughout your whole life. So the Rebbe says, I'm going to give you tools, which is actually the second part of the Tanya. I'm going to give you tools when you're in a down. When you're up, you're fine. You don't need me. When you're down, think about the next 12 chapters that the Rebbe writes in this second part of Tanya. This is what the second part of Tanya talks about. What can you do when you're in a down? When you have doubts? Is really God over there? He's not over there. Is there a world? There's no world. I don't know. I'm in confusion. So think about this. 12 chapters. Okay. What does he talk about in these 12 chapters? The main point is never forget that the only real existence is God. There's nothing else, quote unquote, real. What does that mean, real? To be independent. We all depend on something else. This is also mentioned by the Rambam. I'm going to explain later who the Rambam was, etc. But there's nothing in the world, nothing that can say, I don't need anything or anyone to live. We all depend on something else. At the end of the game, we depend on God. But He doesn't depend on anything. This is the definition of a true existence. That doesn't depend on anything. So the Alter Rebbe explains in a lot of detail and using tools of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, whatever. The Alter Rebbe explains that this is what, when a person is in a down, this is when it's going to bring you up and take away, so to speak, at least momentarily, whatever the case is, your doubts. Okay, how does he do this? I'm not going to repeat the 12 chapters, of course not, but basically 2 ideas that are brought in the text that Angelique sent me. Basically 2 ideas. Idea number 1, creation is not like something God made and it's working, it's functioning, and God went to sleep or whatever he's doing, I don't care. No, creation is an ongoing process. How is it an ongoing process? When you look at the beginning of the creation, in how it's registered in the Torah, in the book, in the Bible, whatever you want to name it, you see that God speaks and things come into being. This idea of speaking, God doesn't have any mouth. So, and who is he talking to? So the idea is not that he's talking. The idea is that just as when we talk, when we actually use our power to talk, our voice is heard. In the same, and when we stop talking, our voice is not heard anymore, like disappears, maybe lasts a few seconds or whatever the amount of time, but doesn't last too much. The same way, all the creation depends on God speaking, quote unquote, constantly. At the second or millisecond, nanosecond, whatever, God stops speaking, the whole creation is nothing, as if it was never over there, never there. The same way that when we stop speaking, so our voice is not heard anymore. And even if you want to say, okay, somebody heard my ideas and my ideas are alive because somebody's talking about, it doesn't matter, really. Actually, your voice is not there anymore. So the creation is an ongoing process. This is something that the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, he spoke about this subject a lot. Alter Rebbe quotes him actually, but it's not the source of this idea. The source of this idea is actually a midrash, which is like works of our sages, written around year 200 of Common Era, around, not exactly. That's where actually this idea appears. Now the creation is an ongoing process. This is point number 1. Point number 2, there's a revealed part of the creation, and there's a hidden part of the creation. And it's very simple to understand why it's like that. We say that God created us to his image. Of course, God doesn't have any image. So what does that mean? One of the explanations, not the only one, but one of the explanations is that our structure of being is just as the whole creation structure, and actually God's himself structure, his structure. What does that mean? It means just as we have a body that we can see and a soul that we cannot see, in the same way the whole world has a body and a soul. The soul of the world is God. He's like inside, so to speak, quote unquote. He's inside and outside also, but whatever. Inside the whole world, giving life to the world. This is the second idea that Alter Rebbe shares in this book, so to speak, 12 chapters, the second part of this book, that there's a hidden part and a revealed part. And the most, mind-boggling or interesting idea behind this is that actually this is only two expressions of God. The way he shows himself, the way he hides himself. If we, because God gave us permission to see his life, his force in the world, we would not see a world. We would see only God. Okay? God doesn't want this, right now at least, and that's why we see a world and we don't see him. But that's the fact, just as when you see a person, you don't see the soul, the neshama, you just see the body. The same way, and you see actually a living body, you don't see a person with like a light on his eyes. Now you see a living body, living person. So the same way, we see a living world. Things move, things happen, etc., etc. This is the second idea that the Alter Rebbe brings. Now, in this text that they actually sent me, there's one more layer of deepness. There he talks about two names of God. The truth is that there are infinite, literally, infinite names to God. Why? Because a name, what it means, the idea behind the name is an expression. And since God is infinite, his expressions are also infinite. But having said that, there are certain expressions, names, expressions of God that appear in the texts, and they mean different things. Like when I'm a rabbi, I'm a rabbi. When I'm a father, I'm a father. When I'm a husband, I'm a husband. It's the same person, yeah, but I express myself as a rabbi. There are things that I would say, things that I would not say. I express myself as a father, things that I would say, things that I would not say. And I express myself as a husband, things that I would say and things that I would not say. Exactly the same thing with God. He's all these things, father and rabbi or whatever you want to call it, and infinite things. So there's an expression of God, how he shows himself as infinite. Literally infinite, beyond time, beyond space, no limitations at all. And there's an expression of God, how he expresses himself as finite. These two names of God, one is called Havaye, that between parentheses, the word Havaye doesn't mean anything. It's just a name. It's just, you could call it whatever. It's a name chosen to reference the name of God with four letters, a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey, which if you don't know Hebrew, don't worry. It's just the name of God. It's called a name that we don't know how to mention, how to call him, how to pronounce. Okay, that's what the main name of God, so to speak. But this expression of God is like God showing himself as infinite. In Hebrew, is Haya, Hoive, Ve'iyeh. He was, he is, and he will be. Like past, present, and future, all at the same time. It doesn't exist, and it doesn't make any sense. You're right. God is not limited to our understanding of things. He's not limited to what we understand and we think makes sense. Small example, a little bit difficult. If you're used to learn these things, you're fine. If you're not used to learn these things, these ideas can like confuse a little bit. But hold your chair, it's gonna be fine. Whatever makes sense for us, it's also creation. It's not that really, objectively speaking, makes sense. No. God created the world in a way that certain things make sense, and certain things just don't make sense. But that's part of the creation. Simple example. Before, father or son, when I'm talking about the father, mother, everything is the same, okay? Men and women are the same. It's just a way of speaking to make it faster. What comes before, father or son? So everybody's going to say, look, the father has to have a certain age to be able to be a father, and then the father comes, and son comes afterwards. Makes sense. What are you, like, you don't have any mind if you're going to say that the son comes before the father? It doesn't make any sense. Okay. God created the world in a way that in our minds, in our human minds, father comes first, son comes afterwards, makes sense. This is like normal speaking. But God could have created the world in a different way, like first son and then father, and that would make perfect sense. And if anybody told you, look, first comes the father and then the son, you would say, you're stupid, you don't know anything. Anything doesn't make any sense. Again, the rules that for us make sense, that's part of the creation. That's part of the system that God gave us to function. But he is not limited to that limitation, so to speak. It's not limited to that logic. He's beyond that logic. So for us, something doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really bother God. It doesn't really make any difference if it doesn't make sense for us. Okay, having said this, again, there's an expression of God, him as infinite, and there's an expression of God as him as finite. These two expressions are actually one thing. This is a famous phrase, verse in the Zohar, in Kabbalah, in mystics, whatever. Havaya v'Elokim kul echad. These two names are actually one thing. You're going to say, no, there's two things. That one. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't have to make any sense. This doesn't mean, because of what I explained, this doesn't mean you cannot ask. There's a huge, infinite difference between saying, look, I don't understand, and it doesn't make sense. That's one way of thought. That's different than saying, how can you ask this? Maybe you have the devil inside. You shouldn't be asking questions. No. In Judaism, we don't have this thing. You can ask, and you can ask whatever you want, in any way you want. Sometimes you're going to have answers. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes the guy you ask to knows, and sometimes he doesn't know. Okay? We're human. But never anybody tells you, you cannot ask this question. You already know, don't learn from this person. He's wrong, or she is wrong, whatever. Don't learn from this person. Get away from him, or from her, whatever. Okay. All of this is the first part of the text. What's the aim? What's the to understand that God is not limited to what we understand it's logic or not logic. It's not limited to this. Infinite and finite is the same for him. It's exactly the same, and he has power, so to speak, in the infinite, and he has power in the same time, at the same time. Maybe, and just maybe, and I didn't see this written anywhere, it's just my way of understanding. Maybe you can find some kind of example when a person wants to pick up something. When you want to pick up something like a regular, normal, extends his arm to pick up something. But you have to extend your hand up to where this object is, not beyond the object and not before the object. Well, otherwise, you're not going to be able to pick up the object. So say there's an object, there's an apple in the table. You want to take the apple with you have to move your hand towards the apple to pick up the apple. Not beyond the apple, not before the apple. Otherwise, you're not going to pick it up. There are two movements actually happening at the same time. Movement number one is you expand your hand like beyond your body to pick up the object. At the same time, you're restricting your hand just to the place where the apple is. Not beyond, because otherwise you're not going to pick it up. But you have to expand that up to a certain point. And you have to go up to you have to restrict yourself to the apple. These two movements for us are like automatic. Pick up the apple. Yeah, you go and pick up the apple. But there are two forces happening at the same time: expansion and contraction at the same time, to be able to pick up the apple. Maybe this is an example of how actually these two expressions of God, infinite and finite, actually are the same thing and happen and work at the same time. This is the first part of the text. The second part of the text talk about a whole different world, about what is called in Hebrew avodah zara. Avodah zara means idolatry. And he quotes from the Rambam. Who was the Rambam? The Rambam was one of our biggest sages. That in the Chabad movement, we learn the Rambam once every year. Every year, there are two ways to learning: 3 chapters a day, you finish the whole thing in 1 year, or 1 chapter a day, and you finish the whole thing in 3 years. In any case, it's a very interesting learning, and between parentheses, this is completely correct for Bnei Noach to learn this, completely, absolutely correct. And the reason is very simple, because if you really want to understand and know what Judaism is about, not because you want to be Jewish, whatever, let the Jews be Jewish. But if you want to understand how the Torah works, how the Jewish thought works, you better have like a big picture of it. You cannot understand what a how is it called? In Spanish it's bosque, when you have many trees. Forest. Thank you. Here I have my son over here, he's listening to my class. You cannot understand what a forest is if you just see one tree. It's impossible. You're going to see what a tree is, correct? That's fine. And you're going to see there's wood and there are leaves. Okay, very nice. But if somebody says forest, you have to understand that there are many trees and there's a smell to the forest and nice, whatever. You're not going to understand the forest if you just see one tree. So if you want to understand what Judaism is all about, even to be a good Ben Noach and Bas Noach, you better learn the Rambam. Because you're going to have really the forest. You're going to understand the whole picture, and then you're going to see, okay, now when I see one tree, I don't see just one tree. I understand where the tree is, what its function is, what does it add to the atmosphere, etc., etc. So the Rambam lived in Spain in the years 1000, 1100, whatever, in Spain, and he wrote a major book of laws, codifying the whole Judaism in one book. Actually, it's 14 books, but it's one book with 14 volumes. Okay, that's the Rambam. And one of the groups of laws in this whole thing is called laws of idolatry. And at the beginning, the Rambam gives like a historical context of idolatry. And he brings the fact that at the beginning of the creation, there was no idolatry because God was revealed, whatever. And in the generation of Enosh, they started the idea of idolatry. How did it start? Because people saw that God created huge creatures like the sun and the moon, and people thought God is giving them honor because they're big and they're powerful. Why shouldn't we give them honor? That's how idolatry started. We should also give honor to God's to those who God gives honor. That doesn't mean that they forgot about God. No, he's like the biggest and the whatever. But below that, there's also powerful creatures. That's how idolatry started. Then it developed into a stage where they forgot about God. And they said, look, this star, this planet, or this whatever, talked to me, false prophets, talked to me and said, bow down to this idol, or do this, or do that, or serve me in this and that way. And that's also like the second stage of idolatry. And then the Rambam, interestingly, is not in the text that Angelique sent me. The Rambam goes on with a long text. This is in English also. You can find it in Sepharia. With a long text, this is the third law in the first chapter of Laws of Idolatry, with a big text of who Abraham was. Who was this guy? And he starts explaining that he also was an idolater, and he live within among idolaters and whatever. He gives a whole explanation of how Abraham came to the conclusion there's only one God. And he started serving one God, and he started publishing there's only one God. So this is the second part. And then also not in the text, but I think it's very interesting to read. I'm just going to read very, very small in few parts, and then I'm open to questions. In the second chapter of the laws of idolatry, the Rambam brings that what's the main thing? This is all law, halacha. What's the main thing of idolatry? The Rambam says idolatry means when you serve any creation of any kind, like spiritual creation, angels, or including spheres. The Rambam doesn't say this. The Rambam, it was not a Mekubal. It's all discussion whether he knew or not. Kabbalah doesn't matter. But any kind of creation you serve besides God, that's it. You're done. This is called idolatry. And then the Rambam says, very interesting, the second law, he says, look, there are many, many books. I'm not reading directly. I'm reading the text of the Rambam. I'm not translating directly. You can look at it. The Rambam said there are many, many books of idolatry. Many, many books. And you know what? Don't read them. Don't get into them because you're going to get confused. So forget it. They wrote hundreds and hundreds of books. Just don't get into that. Get out of there. Now, one more point that I would like to say, and then I'm open to questions, which is a huge, big point. I'm going to do it really briefly, but I think it's very important. In the text that Angelique sent me, there's a word that is in Hebrew, it's called shituf. Shituf literally means partnership. And the texts say, this is what is written, that B'nai Noach are not forbidden to do shituf. This is what the texts actually say. What does that mean? Apparently, what it means is that you could consider, as a non-Jew, you could consider, look, there's God, I believe in him, he's powerful, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? There's a constellation, there's a star named whatever you want to name it. It also has some kind of power. So why not say that God gave this star power, and I'm serving this star because God gave him power? Like the first idea that the Rambam brought about idolatry. Apparently, the texts say that Bnei Noach could do shituf. However, I'm going to read to you a very brief part. It's a longer letter of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe quoting a commentary of Rashi. Rashi lived in France, like 50 years after the Rambam. And to my humble opinion, this is a very powerful line. Why is it like this? I'm going to read you. I don't know, so don't ask. You can continue learning, whatever. You don't ask because I don't have any answer. That's why you shouldn't ask. I don't have the answer. But the truth is that it's very powerful. So the Rebbe writes like this, regarding this idea of Bnei Noach being able, so to speak, to do shituf, which for Jews is completely forbidden. Forget it. Only God and just him. So the Rebbe brings like this. Look, there's a reality in the world, the way God created the world. I'm not reading literally, just the idea. There's a reality that to the nations of the world, the energy, spiritual energy to be alive comes through the stars, through the constellations and whatever. That's true. That's true. For the Jewish people, we can argue it. In the Talmud itself, there's an argument whether the Jewish people have a mazal, don't have a mazal, whatever that means. Don't worry. But to the non-Jews, the energy comes through 70 angels, ministers, whatever in the heavens, etc., etc. And that because they receive energy from them, through them, God gives these angels. The angels are, we spoke about this before. The angels are like tubes, like you put on one side and something comes on the other side. They don't decide anything. They don't have free will. But in any case, the energy comes through them. So because the energy comes through them, they could make a mistake and think that the angel has some power. And the Rebbe says, go look to the commentary of Rashi. This is the whole thing. The letter is longer, but whatever has to do with us. What does Rashi say? Okay, this Rashi is in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, the verse 19. I'm going to read the verse. I'm not a perfect English translator, but whatever. You can look up the verse and you will see the words. Again, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19. It shouldn't be that you will, Moshe is talking to the Jewish people. It shouldn't be that you will rise up your eyes to the heavens and you will see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of the heavens, whatever, and you will get deviated, and you will prosternate yourself to them, and you will serve them. Continues the verse saying that God lived apart, separated God, your Lord, your Master, for them, for the all nations under the heavens. So it sounds from this verse that God, or whatever Moshe is saying in the name of God, look, Jewish people, only God. Non-Jewish people, okay, maybe God separated for them also something else. That's what it sounds from the verse. Rashi explains. You can also read this in English in Sepharia. Rashi says like this: after explaining what does it mean to lift up your eyes to the heavens, to watch whatever the heavens, and maybe you're going to make a mistake and follow the sun, the moon, the stars, etc., etc. And then Rashi says that God separated for them to give light. Like, what is the sun for? To give light. What is the moon there? To give its light in the night, whatever the case is. And then he says, I'm going to give you a different explanation, because this explanation doesn't really make, it's not full. And he says like this: look, God gave the sun, the moon, the stars, etc., for the nations of the world to be their gods, with a small, not capital G, to be their gods. And he continues, God did not prevent them, the nations, to make mistakes, to make a mistake and to follow them, like to think that the sun is a god. God did not prevent them, the nations. Rather, he pavimented the way, like made it a very easy way with like stupid ideas to think that the sun is God and the moon is God, etc., to bring them out of the world. What does that mean? A simple explanation. You can look up this Rashi by yourself. Simple explanation of Rashi is, look, what does God want from whole humanity? To serve him only, just him. To the Jewish people, he said, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. To non-Jewish people, he said, look, you want to think about it? Think about it. But I'm going to collect my punishment, so to speak, if you think about it. That's the difference. It's not that the non-Jews can serve the sun and the moon, and God is not happy if you do shituf, if you associate God with something else. He's not happy about it. He doesn't like it. But he opened the way. You can choose. Do whatever you want. Of course, everybody, even Jews, also have free will to choose if they want to serve the sun or God, whatever. But in the case of the Jew, God was very clear. Don't do it. I don't like it. In the case of the non-Jew, God was not so clear. God said, no, you want to do it? It's your choice. I don't like it, but it's your choice. What does all this thing mean? Just to finish, and then there are some questions in the chat. I'm going to read the questions, and also if people want to talk, whatever. What's the whole point of this? That for some reason, and this is what I said, don't ask because I don't know the answer, but for some reason, God is being more strict with the non-Jews than with the Jews. Because for the Jews, God was very clear. Don't do it. That's it. Okay, if you do it, you're going to have your punishment, whatever. But don't do it. To the non-Jews, it wasn't so clear. It wasn't so clear. You want to make a mistake? Make a mistake. But I don't like it. So don't do shituf. That's the answer. That's the conclusion of the whole point. Don't do shituf. This is basically a very, very long summary of the text that I was sent, which is very interesting.